So 3 parts to the lesson. The first part, we're going to be factorizing a quadratic expression, and they always look like this, where you've got a number in front of an x squared, a number in front of an x, and a value. Okay, we're going to look at positive numbers, then we're going to look at negative numbers, then we're going to look at something called the difference of 2 squares, where the middle term disappears, and both a and c are square numbers, and there's a negative sign in between them. And then we're going to use the skills from those 2 bullet points to go and solve a quadratic equation where you've got both of them equal to 0. Okay, so that's what I intend to do today. Every quadratic expression will look like this, where you have something, a value in front of the x squared. Today we're going to look at the values when a is always 1. There are different quadratic expressions where the value of a could be bigger than 1. For the first 2 parts, b is always a value. Right at the end, we're going to look at the difference of 2 squares, where this middle term disappears. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to look for factor pairs. Now, factor pairs are 2 numbers that multiply to give you a value. Okay, this is always going to be the sum of the factor pairs, and c is the product of the factor pairs. So we're always going to look for 2 numbers that multiply to give you the last value here, and those 2 numbers must add or sum to give you the middle, the number in front of the x. Okay. And then we're going to place those 2 values that come from the factor pairs into brackets as shown. You could have an x plus 4 and an x plus 3 or something. Okay. A quick recap. What we're doing is the opposite of expanding 2 brackets. Now, an easier part of the exam is to just expand these 2 brackets where you multiply them out. We're going to be doing the opposite of that. So just to recap how we multiply these, you say x times x times x is x squared, x times 3 is 3x, then you say 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 3 is 6. And then we total up the 2 middle values, we sum them, and we get that. Okay, so we're going to do the opposite of that today. Okay, that's considered easier work. So we are after 2 values that multiply out to give you 24. If I go back a slide or 2, this is what I'm saying. The value at the end is the product, which is a multiplication. The value at the end, we are after 2 values that multiply to give you this and total to give you this. So we want to list the factor pairs of 24. So you might do this sort of thing. You might just know all the numbers that go into 24. Sometimes the numbers can be a lot harder, like a bigger value, but one method to consider would be this: 1 times 24. If you can halve 24 to get a whole number, then you double the 2. If you can halve 12 to give you 6, then you double the 2 to give you 4. And then if you can halve that, you multiply, you double 4 to give you 8. So I've listed them out as shown. I don't think I did them in the same order, but I've listed them out as shown. So that's the first part. The second part is you sum these values. So when you add up 1 and 24, they give you 25. When you add up 2 and 12, they give you 14, and so on. So you sum the values, and you want, from this list, you want the ones that add up to give you this plus 10. So I've circled it. you would then put those two values into brackets. Okay, as shown. Make sure it wouldn't matter if you wrote them the other way around. So imagine you wrote x plus 6, x plus 4. That's fine, as long as you do get a plus 6 and a plus 4 in there. Just to show you, if I multiplied them out, I'll do it quickly. We've got x squared plus 4x plus 6x plus 24. And when you total up the two center values, you end up with x squared plus 10x plus 24, which is what we started with. And it would be exactly the same if I used what's in the green brackets. Okay. We've got another two examples. Here goes. So you're after factor pairs that multiply to give you 24. I've already discussed them in the last question. There they are. You're looking for the two values that sum to give you this plus 14 in the middle. So I've totaled everything up here. And the ones that give you plus 14 are the 2 and the 12. So then you put the 2 and the 12 into brackets as shown. And you could write them down as x plus 12, x plus 2 if you so wish. Okay, when you multiply them out, you would end up with x squared plus 14x plus 24. Okay, last example. Same set of factor pairs to give you 24, but now we want a sum of 11 because there's a plus 11 there. So the ones we're going to use are the 3 and the 8. You add up the 3 and the 8 to give you 11. So x plus 3, x plus 8, or you could say x plus 8, x plus 3. Okay, so if you want to go back through those before you try these questions, please do so. Otherwise, there are 10 questions there. I'd like you to try at least a number of those and then wait for the answer. So pause the screen and have a go. These are the answers. Okay, so if I just look at one of them, I look at this one here. Numbers that multiply to give you 72. If you wrote out your factors of 72, eventually you would say 6 times 12 is 72. And when I do add those up, they total up to give me 18, which is the number in front of the x. So they multiply to give you 72, they add to give you 18, which is in front of the x. Okay, sometimes what people struggle with is listing out all the factor pairs. Okay, I'll go on to the next slide now, but if you want to slowly go through those, go back through them. Okay, what about negative numbers? Now this is what you're more likely to get. Negative numbers, okay, are there. Exactly the same method, but there's something else to consider. Factor pairs of minus 18, because that is the value at the end. Okay, so I'll write them out. Now then, this is something to think about. Minus 1 times 18 gives you minus 18 when you multiply them. But also down here, you now need to think of plus 1 times a minus 18 gives you minus 18. Okay, because we're dealing with negatives. Obviously, total them up. So the total of 18 and the minus 1 is 17, whereas the total of 1 and the minus 18 is minus 17. Okay, I'll sum them. So I've done this as shown here. And if I just clear that screen slightly, the values that sum to minus 7, because this is the value in front of the x, is shown as follows on the bottom. So you then go and put plus 2 and minus 9 in the bracket as follows. Now, you can't just swap these around and put a plus 9 and a minus 2. That is one answer for 2 marks. If you wish to write them the other way around, you have to have the sign of -9 there and a +2. Okay, if you've got a -2 and a +9, it will be wrong. They have to be these two factors. Yeah, it have to be these two factors to give you a total of -7. Okay, so pause the screen at any time. I'm going to go on to the next question. Same set of factor pairs, because we were given a -18. So there's the factor pairs. As I listed previously, but we now want the number in front of the x is -3, as shown here. So whichever one of these, I total them up on the side, and the one that totals up to -3 is down the bottom, 3 and a -6. So just put those into a bracket as shown, ensuring it's +3 and -6, but if you wrote it the other way around, it's got to be x -6, x +3. Okay, do not change the signs. Okay, and the last one is this one. Now, +18, I've changed the last number now. So the factor pairs, for instance, 1 times 18 gives you 18. We did this at the beginning of the lesson. However, there is another way, because there's a -9 there is another way of getting +18, and that would be -1 times -18, because if the signs are the same, you get a +18. So that's what I'm bringing into it now. So I'm going to list out all the factor pairs. +18, there they are. And I'm going to total these up. Just bear in mind, when you total these up, it's -19. When you total these up, it's -11, and so on. And the bottom one is -9. Okay, and I want now that these factor pairs should add up to give you -9. So the one I'm going to select is right down the bottom of the screen, -6 and -3. Okay. And if you said x -6, x -3, that would be the same. So if you want to slow it down and have a look at it again, please do so. Otherwise, I've got 10 questions for you to try. Here they are. I would pause the screen and try as many of those as you're able to do so. Right, for the answers, I'll just consider 1 or 2 of them with the double negatives in. To get +60, you could multiply 3 times 20, but you should also consider -3 times -20, which will give us the answer to that one. And I'll give you the answers here. Similar with this one here. It's one to watch out for. -7 times -7. They multiply to give you +49. But they add or total up to give us -14. Okay. Moving on. Right. This is still factorising a quadratic, but on this occasion, the value of b is 0, so this becomes 0. So that term disappears, and the value of c is a negative value. Right, so what we end up with is this. So it's still factorising a quadratic, but we look for this because the letter a, or the number in front of the x squared, is always a square number, and this is always a square number, as I've said, and there's a different sign or a negative sign in between. Okay. then this is the method we follow. It's about identifying this. Okay, so those are all the square numbers you should know, and you should know more, or at least be able to work out more if you perhaps needed a calculator. But if you can't identify those square numbers, you won't be able to do this question. So please highlight that and learn them. Okay, and if you identify these square numbers with a difference or a negative sign between them, then you've got a chance of doing this question. So let's get on to some questions. So that's typical. You'd complete, you know you're going to end up with two brackets. So what I'm looking for, 4 and 25 are square numbers. And there's a difference sign between them, or negative sign between them. So this method is going to apply. So what we do is this. We find the square root of 4, which is 2, and the square root of 25, which is 5. So there's the two square numbers, and we write them into brackets as follows. Okay, so you write down the square root of 4x squared is 2x. So you put that at the beginning of both brackets, and the square root of 25 is 5. In actual fact, the square root of 25 is plus 5 and minus 5. So you put a plus in front of one and a minus in front of the other. Okay, I've done it the other way here, but just to show you, so you find the square root of this, which is 2x, you write 2x there and 2x there. You find the square root of 25, so you put a minus 5 in front of one of them and a plus 5 in front of the other. Now if you multiply these out, I just want to show you, if you multiply these out, you would actually get the middle two terms would disappear. So you end up with 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times plus 5 is plus 10x. Minus 5 times 2x is minus 10x. And minus 5 times plus 5 is minus 25. Now, you can see that you've got a plus 10x and a minus 10x, so they disappear. So if you were to multiply them out, you would end up with the expression up here. All right, but all you need to do for the 2 marks is write that down and that down. Let's look at the second question. Okay, so 9 and 36 are square numbers. There's a negative sign between them, so this is the method we use. The square root of 9 and 36 are 3 and 6, so therefore we write down the square root of 9y is 3, square root of 9y is 3y. We put it at the beginning of each bracket, and the square root of 36 is 6, so you put a plus 6 and a minus 6, as I've done here. Okay, and that would get you 2 marks. Okay, so pause the screen if you want to look at it in more detail. I'm going to go ahead and show you questions. So, oh, there's another one. Square root of 16 is 4, square root of 64 is 8. There's a negative sign between them. So then what you do is put them into brackets as 4y at the beginning and then plus and minus 8. Okay. Questions for you to try. Okay, so a little bit more thought in one or two of these. I haven't shown you that yet, but I'm sure you could attempt them. Okay, off you go. Pause the screen. I'll give you some answers in a moment. So the answers to the first 5 are there. And the next 5 are here. Okay, just one or two things to consider here. When I look at, say, question 9, the square root of 4x squared is obviously 2x. But this is a little bit more interesting. to get 64r squared y squared, you would have a minus 8ry and a plus 8ry. When you multiply those out, you end up with a negative 64ry. Okay, similar with this question, you'd have 36y to the power 4 by multiplying a minus 6y squared times a plus 6y squared. Okay, so it's just a little bit more thought involved. Okay, pause the screen if you wish. I'm going to move on. Okay, solving quadratic equations. So what we're going to end up doing is we must first factorize the quadratic. So we factorized this quadratic earlier in the lesson. That gives you the 2 marks then there. And then what I'm going to do is, to get an answer of 0, because really what we've got is this bracket multiplied by this bracket. So to get an answer of 0, anything times 0 is 0. I'm going to make the first bracket equal to 0 first. Right, so the first bracket is equal to 0. So this bracket, I'm going to make that equal to 0. So I'm going to write down x plus 2 is 0. So therefore, x is minus 2. That is one answer. I can get an answer of 0 by making the second bracket equal to 0. So I say x plus 12 is equal to 0. Hence I got an answer of x is minus 12. Now I need these 2 answers to get my third mark. Okay, a second question. Okay, so I've gone ahead and factorized that, which we should do from above. So I make the first bracket equal to 0 because anything, whatever this is, if this is 0, this could be a million. Anything or 0 times something is 0. So if I make that first bracket equal to 0, I end up with x is 6. If I make the second bracket equal to 0, I've got x is 4. So I've got 2 solutions. Now I should sort of mention to you that there is a graphical way of solving this quadratic equation. Okay, it's not in my list of things to do today, but you could solve this by drawing a curved graph, and where it crosses the x-axis, it crosses the x-axis at plus 6 and plus 4. So you might have a curved graph and you get plus 4 there, plus 6 there. That's a graphical way of solving it, but we're not doing that today. I've got a number of questions I'd like you to try, so pause the screen once I show you the questions. There they are. You need to factorize everything, the 3 types of factorizing I've done so far, and just make those brackets equal to 0. Okay, so off you go. Okay, these are the answers. So for instance, x squared minus 25, I would factorize that. It's the difference of 2 squares, so it's x minus 5 times x plus 5 equals to 0. Right, that would give me 2 marks, and then I make that bracket equal to 0, producing an answer of minus 5. I make that bracket equal to 0, producing an answer of minus 5. Okay. With this one, when you factorized, you've got 2x minus 4 equal to 0. So when you move the minus 4 over, you end up with 2x is 4. So x is 2 is one answer, and then the other way around, x is minus 2 is the other answer. Okay, so that's all I wish to do today. I'm going to just recap very slightly. Before I show you this, we've done 3 topics today on factorizing and using brackets, but this is something I'm going to do in the future. Factorizing single brackets there. factorising a quadratic where you need to use a formula. So you need to use this. There's a formula on the front page of both exam papers, and sorry, this is here, the formula. And the formula is on the front page of both exam papers. And there's a factorising where the value of a here is bigger than 1. We haven't done that today, but that's to be covered in a future lesson.